All right, good evening, folks. I'm not Peter Hammond, so if you're expecting him, my apologies, he's not here this evening. Many of the faces I recognize. Thanks for coming back. And so let me preface this by saying a couple things. First, thank you. I think when I was here last month, we had a very spirited and engaging conversation, and some people didn't agree with the things I said. That's good. That's healthy from my perspective. If we agree on everything, at some point we become sycophants. So it's okay to disagree. And what I'll share with you tonight is my view, my assessment, my opinion. Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong, but I will say that I have a pretty good track record. So you can listen to me and you can agree with me or disagree with me, but the odds are that I probably will get most of the things right. That's not a boast, just a statement of historical fact. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about your elections, and from an outsider's perspective. I'm an American. I was here, I observed your elections. I'm also a political analyst, and it was a former intelligence officer, and have, of course, been involved in Africa for decades now. So this is my view on how things went, and you may agree on some of it, you may disagree on some of it, and that's fine. I'll take questions as we go. You can just raise your hand, interrupt me at any time. I'll try to address it. And then when we wrap up with the South African things, if there's anybody left and we haven't started any fights or burnt the building down, then I'll be happy to entertain questions and talk about America's election and what I think is going to happen there. Now, on that election, I will tell you that I'm probably stepping out on a limb that might be very thin, okay? Because things are so crazy in America, so many things could happen between now and November that my projections could completely be wiped out by events. I reserve the right to change my analysis when the facts change. How's that, okay? I think that's fair. So in November of 2021, after the municipal elections, which I had spent the better part of 18 months since I started broadcasting on YouTube and retired from the military and also writing for publications, I tried to encourage South Africans to go to the polls. Over and over again, I asked them to go to the polls. And my reason for that was the following. South Africa, your society politically is a bit different than ours. So in America, typically the government doesn't provide services that you get from your government here. So for instance, my rubbish is collected by a private company whom I pay. If I don't pay them, my rubbish piles up and then I get in trouble with my local government because I have rubbish in my yard. And my neighbors will probably pull shotguns out at me and threaten me if I don't get the rats out of the yard. That was a joke. All right, I'm glad somebody got it there. So my rubbish is collected that way. My water comes from a co-op, which used to be a private for-profit company. And about 4 decades ago, the local municipality decided to, we call them boroughs in Pennsylvania, not municipalities, but they decided to buy it and make it a public utility and merge it with another one because the water sources were all in one location. So it's a co-op essentially, not really a government organization. And then my electricity comes from a private supplier. So all the services I get outside of government, they have nothing to do with it. The government does provide public schools, and I pay a lot of money in taxes for that school, whether I have kids there or not. And they do provide maintenance of the roads and jurisdictions and governance and rules and things like that so that people can have a civil society. But that's different. In South Africa, your rubbish, your police, your rates, all that stuff is coming from your local government by and large, right? I mean, I know that there are private services, like I just did an interview with a private fire service in Johannesburg because the city fire department has pretty much collapsed. So private vendors are providing that service, which is kind of like similar to a system we have in parts of America. But I try to encourage South Africans in 2020, from 2020 to 2021, to please go vote in municipal elections. And my argument was this. As a South African, the way that you see government applying in your life every day is by and large at the municipal level. If your rubbish isn't collected, if your electricity is not there, if the police aren't responsive, if there's no fire service, it's your local government. And how can you show South Africans, particularly the born frees, that someone other than the ANC can govern your country at the local level? That was my argument. Unfortunately for me, most South Africans, just like ours, people don't show up at our elections for municipal things either. Most South Africans didn't go to the poll. Your turnout rate was 31%, and nothing really changed, except in one place, which proved my point. In KwaZulu-Natal, the Inkatha Freedom Party gained more votes, but they only gained 2% more votes in 2021 than they had in 2016, 2%. Yet in KZN, because ANC voters stayed home because of the July 2021 riots, the insurrection inside the ANC, which occurred mostly in KZN, but also in Soweto, and the damage that was caused, the loss of life, a lot of ANC voters said, I'm done with the ANC. I'm not voting. Look what they did. They did nothing for us. So because so many fewer ANC voters showed up, the Inkatha Freedom Party, despite only gaining a small number of votes nationally, went from controlling 9 municipalities to 24, either through an outright majority in the municipality, or a majority coalition with the DA or someone else, or through a minority coalition. And that's the power of your vote. Only 2% gain, yet they took over 15 more cities. That's amazing when you think about it. And that was the argument I was making. People are like, you don't know anything about politics. You don't know anything. I'm a political scientist, historian. I know a little something about it. And you don't know anything about South Africa. Well, I was right. And that's what happened. I wanted South Africans to do that nationally, but it didn't happen nationally, which is unfortunate. Because the problem is that most people in South Africa were born after apartheid. And most politicians aren't coming to grips with that, especially the ANC. They still think they can dance out there and go, hey, liberation, yeah, Madiba. It isn't resonating with younger South Africans. And I know younger South Africans don't vote, but they're going to lose even more voters as we go forward because you can't trot out liberation. 25-year-old, 35-year-olds don't want to hear that. They want jobs. They want the darn roads fixed. They want electricity. I think we all want electricity. Pretty amazing we have it tonight, right? It's been a long time since you had load shedding, fortunately. So the ANC lost a lot of votes because what they did. So if South Africans went out and they could show younger generation that the DA or the Freedom Front Plus or ACDP or the IFP is running a city and look, things are working, then people go, oh, you know what? We don't need the ANC. But that's not what happened. So in this election, let's just go with winners and losers, okay? So this is my view on winners and losers in this election. There are only 2 real winners, well, 3. 2 major winners and a third one who's a marginal winner. The 2 major winners in this election were the Patriotic Alliance, which in 2019 had 6,600 votes. This time they had 330,000 votes. It's a huge gain. And people say, well, they hurt the DA. I don't agree with that argument, looking at the information that's available at the moment. In my view, the Patriotic Alliance and MK energized people who were no longer voting, especially in Western Cape colored voters who just weren't going to the polls anymore for the most part. So they may have taken some DA votes, but the DA still wound up with 55%, which is essentially what they had in 2019 in the Western Cape. So virtually no change for them. They probably lost a few votes there, but they also picked up a lot of votes from one of the other parties that lost significantly, and that was the Freedom Front Plus. They lost a lot of votes. About half their votes disappeared. And I believe many of those votes were in the Western Cape, where a lot of voters here were terrified or very concerned that the Democratic Alliance would not get a clear majority. So I believe that many voters in the Western Cape who voted Freedom Front Plus last time, many of them bum-hurt about Musi Maimane and the leftward swing of the DA in 2019, came back to the DA to keep them in power in the Western Cape. But whether you like him or dislike him, you have to look at Gate McKenzie Patriotic Alliance if you're objective and say, they were successful. That's pretty impressive. They have 9 seats in Parliament. They had none. They've never been in Parliament before. Now they have 9 seats and 2% of the vote, which can make them a kingmaker. In this case, it isn't, but it could have made them a kingmaker in a coalition. The other major winner in this, and they don't seem convinced, they think they won the election, is MK. Nobody predicted them to get 14.5%. Based on all the crazy polls that were out there, the Brent Hurst poll, the Ipsos poll, the social research poll, all those things were coming on. It was difficult to gauge. And I projected that my estimation was somewhere between 7 and 13%. Now that's a little bit of fudging, but the data was all over the place. So I was just looking at what was available. They got 14.5, so they did better than I expected. And I thought that in KZN, they would be the number 1 party, but just a plurality. They're almost a majority party in KZN. They got 45% of the vote. That's incredible. Yes, it may be a cult of personality around Jacob Zuma, but the reality is they're big winners. So those are your 2 big winners. The minor winner, in my view, was the Inkatha Freedom Party. They're the only major party that actually gained votes in this election. They gained about 30,000, which is not much, but they gained 30,000 votes in the face of all these Zulu in KwaZulu-Natal voting for MK, which didn't even exist before. In my view, many of those people who voted for MK would have voted for Inkatha Freedom Party this time around if MK hadn't existed. So now the Inkatha Freedom Party is back up to about 4% of the popular vote, and they have 17 seats in Parliament. So when the results came out after I was here last time, as they dribbled out, I looked at it and I said, well, the smart money here is the least worst option. So this is the best, least worst option. A coalition between the ANC, the DA, and the IFP. Many people don't like that, but South Africa has very few options. You have to have a government, people have to work together, or at some point you're going to have to revote. And there's no money for that. And I don't think there's much enthusiasm for it, because quite frankly, now that people know the ANC can be wounded, if there were a revote in 90 days, I think the ANC would decline even further and MK would go up. And then you have real problems in this country, in my view. So this is the best, least worst option, in my view, as an outsider looking at South Africa. Is it perfect? Good Lord, no, it's not perfect. Is it problematic? Yes, it's problematic. But imagine an alliance between the ANC, MK, and EFF. About a month and a half, 2 months before the election, so 3 months ago now, I did a video, an analysis of, based on the Brenthurst poll that had just come out. I said, if these numbers hold true, these are the possible coalitions. And I named one the Armageddon or Doomsday Coalition, and that was those three parties. I said it was unlikely. The ANC doesn't like MK. They're angry about it. They don't like Julius Malema and the EFF, so they would only take this as a last resort. And the last resort would be if the ANC got below 40%. But in November 2021, after looking at the municipal elections, I predicted that the ANC would get 38 to 42%, and I didn't change my prediction. I stuck with that, whether there's load shedding or the formation of MK. That was still my analysis. The facts changed, but I thought the data was still there. And I nearly nailed it, right? 40.2%. That's pretty close. Although some people are saying that the revised data is saying it's 39, but whatever the case is, they fell in that window. So that was unlikely. Then I also came up with something I called the Zimbabwe for South Africa scenario. In Zimbabwe for South Africa scenario, to me, was an ANC-DA alliance, a coalition. And the reason I say that is that the ANC, if they're driven down below 50% and close to 40%, they would need a partner. They don't want the EFF, regardless of what they got. They don't want MK. So who's left? The only other party with a significant number of votes to get them over 50%, my view, would be, and it turned out to be, the Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance, in my view, is very hungry to be in power. Regardless of what they say about the ANC, they want to be in power. It's not a comment against them. It's not a comment for them. It's just a statement of my analysis and my belief, knowing folks in the DA and what they're trying to accomplish. So with that alliance, the reason I called it Zimbabwe for South Africa is that in 2008, the Movement for Democratic Change won the elections in Zimbabwe outright, despite the fact that ZANU-PF stuffed ballot boxes and murdered members of MDC across the country to intimidate voters. They still won the election. The ZANU-PF was so incompetent, even though they cheated, they still lost the election. That's how badly they lost. Robert Mugabe lost the presidential race by 10%, yet he refused to leave power. So SADC, which is a feckless, useless organization, which I used to be the liaison officer to, so I've worked with them a lot. I have nothing against them, but they really don't do much. They do what they're put there for, just to be a conversation organization. They're not there to have any exercise any power. But for once, they stepped up and said, hey, we got to do something. And SADC convinced, with South Africa's help and other partners, convinced Zimbabwe to have a government of national unity in 2008. Now, the government of national unity merged the ZANU-PF losers with the MDC winners. But ZANU-PF controlled the entire security cluster. The military, the police, the Central Intelligence Organization, which is their CIA, and prisons, justice, all of that. They gave the MDC the figurehead position of prime minister, which was non-existent. They had to recreate it. It was eliminated in 1988 when they came in with the new constitution. Because the Electric House Agreement guaranteed 8 years, 20 seats reserved for the white minority of an 80-seat parliament, and the same system of government for 8 years. And as soon as that 8-year period was up, Mugabe changed that system. He went from being prime minister to president, and was president until he was ousted in 2017. So they created the figurehead position of prime minister and put Morgan Tsvangirai in there, but he had no authority. He had no control. He made no decisions. It's just a figurehead titular position. They gave the finance ministry to Tendai Biti, and he immediately dollarized the economy, and Zimbabwe's economy stopped its free fall and began to improve, and life got better for many Zimbabweans for a couple of years. And they gave them things, I don't know, the other ministries, something, maybe tourism or something like that, but nothing of any real power. And as a consequence, Zimbabwe stabilized, but then of course, ZANU-PF put their own agents inside the other party, undermined it, divided the party, plus there was some internal division, and the opposition eventually fell apart, even though they've been around for several years. And then the economy began to go sideways because the government stole again, because there was more resources, and ZANU was very hungry for stealing. And so the country went on the slide. The reason I say Zimbabwe for South Africa is that I expect, now, I could be proven very wrong in the next 24, 48, or 72 hours. And I'd love to be proven wrong. But if the DA was smart in the agreement they made for this government of national unity, which is not a government of national unity, it's a coalition. And I've said that since the outset. The EFF is actually agreeing with me. EFF is saying the same thing. It's rare that the EFF and I say the same thing, but they and MK, who just, they're all saying that, and they're right. Bantu Holomisa, whom I've interviewed many, many times, and I spoke to and interviewed last week, also said this is not a government national unity, because it's not. A government national unity would include all actors in parliament, and they would all contribute. And that's very difficult to do with 18 parties represented in parliament. But this coalition, going forward, if the DA was smart, in my view, they should have demanded finance, public enterprises, justice, education, and the police. Of those, I think they're going to get finance so that they can improve tax collection, stabilize the economy, bring foreign direct investment in with confidence, because people will believe the DA will make a difference. And that will raise more revenue for the criminals in the ANC to continue to steal. And the country will continue to decline, in my view, but not at the same rate. And people won't notice it from day to day. But 5 years from now, you'd be like, whoa, are we better off than we were in 2024? Maybe we're not. Some people are. Cadres are. Maybe the DA is. But what about the average South African? Now, I can be entirely wrong on this analysis, but that's my second one. I came up with two other coalition possibilities. One was a grand alliance, which is essentially the government national unity, but it didn't include all parties. And that one would have been one where basically the members, the multi-party charter, which I covered their formation at Kempton Park last year, those parties would go into a coalition with the ANC and give them over 70% of the vote, and that would be a credible government, and that's a possibility, but that's very fractious. And now with Patriotic Alliance and Tani Pat joining the government national unity, that's kind of challenging now. If it was just the ANC, the DA, and the IFP, it was manageable. But it becomes, the more players you have, the more difficult it is to get consensus and make decisions. And there's already big challenges between what the ANC wants to achieve and what the DA wants to achieve. There's a lot of difference. Throwing more players in there, actually, I think the addition of the IFP was a wise move. And if the ANC and the DA were humble, which they're not, in my view, they're not humble, but if they were humble, they should have both said, we're not going to nominate anybody. This was never going to happen, by the way, but they should not nominate anybody. You know what? We think that Velenkosini Hlabisa should be the president. And quite frankly, I think that would be the smartest thing for South Africa, but obviously that's not going to happen. Hlabisa is a rational, middle of the road, slightly right of center, conservative, centrist, who has been mentored by Mangosuthu Buthelezi for decades. He is cognizant of what this country is about. And he's an honorable man, in my view. That's my opinion. And I think that would be a great president for the country. Ramaphosa, I'm not going to get into that unless you have questions about Ramaphosa, but that would have been the right path. As it is, we'll wait and see what Ramaphosa does to announce his cabinet. But unfortunately, I don't think that the ministries of the DA, which is largely competent in my view, look, I'm not a supporter of the DA, I'm just being honest in my view, they're not going to get the ministries that will make South Africa a better place in the short term, except for maybe finance. They'll probably get something like tourism, maybe some other stuff. But public enterprises, your state-owned enterprises, which, by the way, the DA likes. They like state-owned enterprises, but they think they're better at running them, and they probably are, because they're mostly not crooks. That's a good start. But they're not going to get foreign affairs. Not going to happen. ANC will never do that. The party would implode. So the president has the ability to bring two people who are not in parliament into his cabinet. There's a cost to doing that, but I have a strong suspicion and a fear, quite frankly, because I have nothing but contempt for her, that Naledi Pandor will remain the foreign minister in charge of DIRCO. And that will continue this crazy march for South Africa, poking its benefactors in the eye, like the United States, European Union, and others, while chumming up to Tehran, Beijing, and Russia to the detriment of South Africans. Now, Russia's trade with South Africa is 0.2% of your GDP. 9% of your GDP is trade with the United States, two-way trade. So that's of your trade, 9%. There you go. So that's $20 billion a year. We're the second largest trading partner with South Africa. And a lot of South Africans don't like to hear this because they think that South Africa is very important to America. And while I love South Africa, and I think that's pretty self-evident for people who follow me, you see me keep coming here, spending my personal wealth, travel here and talk to people. I do love South Africa, a great affinity for it. It's an amazing country. You folks are amazing. All folks, white, black, colored, Muslim, Christian, Jew. What a country. It's amazing. But honestly, geopolitically, South Africa is not that important. Certainly not to the United States. But AGOA, America. People don't understand AGOA. The African Growth and Opportunity Act is a gift to Africa, which we gave. Oh, that's pretty arrogant of you. No, it's not. We get no reciprocity from it. We allow African countries who agree to meet certain governance standards, which we're very loose in accepting, because South Africa has violated these governance standards by by putting the motion for expropriation without compensation on the table. That's a violation of the terms of AGOA because you have to respect property rights, and that doesn't respect them. But anyway, that aside, we get nothing from AGOA other than goodwill. And we don't even get that from the ANC. We allow your goods and services, over 6,800 items and services, to go into America duty-free. You pay no fee. But the Europeans, when they ship goods, the Japanese, the Chinese ship goods to America, they pay tariffs to ship their goods in America. There's importation tariffs, 2%, 2.5%. Some are higher than that, depending on the category. You pay nothing. And why do we do this? Because we want access to African governments, and we also want them to be democratic, and that's the reason we do it. That's why it was created. But we get nothing out of it. I mean, the ANC imposed 70% tariffs on imported chicken from America because they fraudulently claimed that we were undermining South Africa's poultry industry. Frankly, the ANC has undermined South Africa's poultry industry, not the American poultry industry. And we're not dumping poultry here. We're shipping things that we don't eat. Americans don't eat chicken feet. A lot of South Africans do. So why let it go to waste or grind up for dog food when you ship to South Africa and make money off of it? And that's what was going on. Anyway, so we don't get anything from that. And the ANC has been poking us in the eye. Frankly, the African National Congress has taken so many actions in the past 3 years that are contrary to our national security interests that if I were president, they would be suspended. Your country would be suspended from AGOA, and we would have serious issues in our relationship because you keep poking the U.S. Not you, but your government keeps poking the U.S. in the eye, and against our national security interests. Whether it's the Lady R incident, whatever happened there, or it's this Gaza situation. And this case where the ANC claims to have the moral high ground by going to the International Court of Justice to lodge a complaint against Israel for genocide. But the ANC, as I said last time I was here, is strangely silent in 2019 when the Gambia set the precedent for taking a genocide case against another state to the International Court of Justice when they charged Myanmar with that against the Rohingya Muslim minority. Where's the ANC's amicus brief and friend of the court? Why didn't they join the case if they have the moral high ground and they're concerned about genocide? Why is the ANC strangely silent about 5.5 million people starving in Sudan at the moment because the RSF and Al Burhan's government are killing each other and people are hungry? They're silent. But they got lots to say about people going hungry in Gaza. And that's their prerogative. But the point is that they're doing things contrary to U.S. national security interests, and they're getting away with it. There's no cost. But anyway, I got a little bit off track with that. So the point was that then I hear from South Africans, well, we have gold. Well, guys, the gold is so deep in the ground at this point, so expensive to extract. The Indaba, the BE and the Cater contracts and the disruption of the mining industry has made it so expensive and costly and unaffordable that South Africa's gold production goes anywhere from 6th to 10th in the world annually. This was the world's largest gold producer for well over a century, and now you're far down. And not so much because you're producing less gold, but because China, Australia, Canada, and the U.S. are producing more gold. So gold doesn't make South Africa an important player internationally. Well, what about the sea lanes? Well, if you look at the stats, South Africa has the worst performing ports in the world. Sorry, it's just the truth. Your ports, the delays are so long. The ability to get goods in and out of there is so horrible right now. It's gotten so bad with Transnet that ships just go right past South Africa. They don't bother to stop here. They'll stop somewhere else in West Africa if they have to stop. And most people, of course, will take the shorter route through the Suez Canal. But if it were shut down, people would just go around South Africa. By and large, they wouldn't stop here. So that's, and your Navy can't patrol the blue water here. I mean, the ships they bought from the Germans for a ridiculous amount of money are sitting in port. Only one or two of them get out to sea occasionally. Your submarines are falling apart. So look, I'm not attacking South Africa. I'm just saying that the reality is that a lot of South Africans are trapped in a 1970s mentality, thinking this country is in 1970, 1980, South Africa was incredibly important geopolitically in the fight against communism, for gold, for strategic minerals. But other actors provide those things now. And while I love South Africa, the ANC's bargaining position is not as great as I think it is. And they run a real risk of isolating South Africa, particularly now. They refuse to, one of several countries, most in Africa, refuse to condemn Russia for the invasion. I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying that stood out. It stood out. It was different than others, and it got people's attention. The Gaza thing, they're welcome to do that. But what about Myanmar? What about the Rohingya there? What about the Uyghurs in China? There's genocide going on there. ANC has nothing to say. They're very selective, and they run the risk. So South Africa, unfortunately, is not as important geopolitically as people think it is, especially South Africans. And it kind of reminds me when I lived in Liberia. Liberians think that Liberia is so important to America. Most Americans never heard of Liberia. They've never heard of it. But Liberians have a strong affiliation and connection to America because the origin of the country of Liberia, founded by former slaves and free blacks who came from America and imposed an alien political system on the indigenous population there, and basically replicated what they saw in America with a Congress, a House, a Senate, a president, same sort of thing. And even naming their towns and places after American President Buchanan, and of course, Liberia for Liberty, and Monrovia after James Monroe, and Maryland County after the state of Maryland where many former slaves and free blacks came from. So Liberians think that they're very important to America. And while I have an affinity for Liberia and I help rebuild their military and restore peace there, which I'm very glad we were able to accomplish with their help, they had to have the will to do it, and they did. Most Americans have no idea where Liberia is. They couldn't find it on the map, and they don't care. And that's the reality in the world today. Unfortunately, the world is navel gazing at China, Taiwan, and Russia, and Ukraine. That's where most of the world's attention is at right now. So in that context, it really puts you at risk. So what happens now? Let's get back to the election. Well, as I said, in my view, I talked to someone today who's a journalist. We had breakfast this morning, a very famous journalist in South Africa, a very good one. One of the ones, actually a good journalist here. And he said that an analyst talked to him and he said that this is a market-friendly coalition. That's what they're calling it. That's what he called it rather than a government national union. I said, that's a fair statement. But again, my description is it's the best, least worst option for South Africa. Maybe you'll get lucky and the honest, legitimate people in the African National Congress will step forward now because they're there. There's genuine people in the ANC. Maybe they'll step forward and push the criminals aside. A lot of them are gone, let's be honest, because the ANC messed up its list. They didn't really understand a system that they created. And there are a lot of people out of government now. Yeah, that's true. There's a lot. Look, Beckett Chile's not in government anymore. Neither is now Lady Pondor unless she gets appointed by the president in one of his two options. I don't think he's going to exercise, but he might for that. But a lot of ANC members that have been there since '94 are no longer in government because they messed up their list. They didn't understand the regional list. Long story, but bottom line is that they're gone. So maybe a lot of that dead wood is gone, and that might be a brighter day for South Africa. And hopefully the DA is honest and doesn't get drunk with power now that they have shared power at the national level, and they will hold the ANC accountable and things will improve. And I pray for South Africa that that's what happens because that's what you deserve. You deserve a government that represents your interests, that addresses your needs, and is responsive to you. Unfortunately, the system you have, like our system is heading that direction too, isn't really responsive to the average South African, in my view. As a person from the outside, I'm looking at. So I'm hoping that that's what will happen. Until I see who the ministers are and how the government works in the first 90 days, I don't think I can really make a prediction of where it's going to go. But that's my thoughts on it. I'll stop there and entertain any questions or comments or refutations of what I've stated by anybody. If anybody's got a question. Anybody? Don't be shy. They don't cost anything. I don't charge for questions. I only charge for answers. So after I answer, then you have to pay me. No thoughts? Well, let me ask you guys. You can by show of hands, okay? Who is happy with the government and national unity being formed? Anybody? Raise your hand if you are. One person, okay? All right, and I'll say that your response, the one person put hand up, is a pragmatic response. And I think that that's the term we have to use here, pragmatism. There are a lot of people that are angry because the DA is in a coalition now, or alliance, whatever you want to call it, a GNU, an ungulate, a herbivore, not, anyway, a piece of wildlife, because that's what a GNU is. The government national unity, that the DA went into this. Well, these are the people that wanted to have a vote of no confidence to get rid of Munir Palapala for Palapala. That's true. But the facts change, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody has to govern South Africa, and the ANC needs a partner. And that gave the DA leverage to get into government and hopefully demand cabinet positions, ministerial positions that can improve your lives, or at least get the government off your back. That's a good thing in itself. So Helen Zille, as the federal chairperson, said, we are not going to support a vote of no confidence, which the EFF is going to bring. And frankly, I'm honest with you, I'd love to see Munir Palapala gone as well, but it's not going to happen. And that's just the way it is. So if people are angry about that, you're not being very pragmatic. That's my view. People may disagree. Okay, so how many people would prefer to see an ANC, MK, EFF alliance? Okay, we're down to 0 now. We went from 1 to 0. Okay, For those who can't see the audience, there's actually a lot more than one person here. So people are reserving their vote, which is what people did in 2021 when the ANC let the country burn. So you're exercising your right there. All right, so let me try another one here. What about ANC EFF PA? Ooh, I see head shaking no. Okay. All right, so what is the solution? A revote? Who wants a revote? Raise your hands. Nobody. All right. Who cares? Raise your hand. Does anybody care? Oh, thank goodness. Oh, my goodness. Oh, look, I flew back from Gauteng to come here tonight. True story. I mean, the Bulls messed up my travel plan by winning, which I'm fine with, but it was supposed to be in Munster, but Munster got beat by Glasgow. So I had to buy a plane ticket, hire a car, and get a hotel room, and spend more money by going up there because I'm not going to miss the final. I mean, I come all this way. I'm going to miss the final after going to the quarterfinal, then the semifinal. So anyway, so I really did come all the way back here because my promise to Peter Hammond to come back and speak to you guys tonight. So, all right, you got a question for me, sir? We stopped doing the polls. I want to do something else.
Well, look, government of national unity. At least now, you don't have a majority ANC.
Correct.
And even if you're one of the smallest members, you have a voice, which means there's going to be dissenting voices. Not everyone's going to agree. And the ANC can't just throw their weight around. And from what I understand, it can't even be the ANC-DA throwing their weight around.
If it's a government of national unity, and it depends on the terms, which we haven't seen, but you may be very well correct. The terms they agreed to, which was between the ANC and the DA, was this government of national unity, real coalition. They agreed to certain terms. And something's coming out in the media now because it's being reported in the media, and I can't confirm this. We have to wait and see. But there's a beef between Helen Zille and Fikile Mbalula because apparently, according to the press, which often gets things wrong, but sometimes they get it right. According to the press, Mbalula invited Tani Pat and the PA to this government of national unity, but the agreement supposedly said that both the ANC and DA had to agree anybody that came into it. So that's not a government national unity. But yeah, that may very well be the case. We don't know. But yeah, it's thanks for that. That's good. Well, let me ask you this question before we go on. Is anybody finding it odd that an American's up here talking to you about your election? Raise your hand. Okay. All right. Okay. That's fair. That's fair. How many want me to leave right now? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I mean, look, I can go to McDonald's. Oh, no, not McDonald's. Oh, gosh. Not McDonald's. I don't know. Maybe Rocco Mama's or something like that. Yes, sir.
I think that everybody just feels, there's an old saying, you can't make deals with the devil, And
yeah.
Us looking at this history, you just has proved itself so many times, you try and make deals with such a corrupt party that we see no good thing in them, that every level of division of theirs is, they're stealing everything, is so bad that we just on the street cannot see how this is going to stop them. They're going to carry on quite happily with it. I don't think the DA is going to be able to stop us, and I think it's going to land up in a big body somewhere and a split up, and then the DA is going to walk away, and then there's going to be a whole mess. And so I don't think any of us that have lived in South Africa all our lives trust the ANC one iota, you know what I mean, and think that there's any good thing. And you say there are good people in there, but we have not seen it.
No, I said I hope there are good people.
So every department's corrupt.
Yeah. No, that's a fair statement.
It's good, and it's very difficult to fix corruption, especially if it's in your army and your police force and things like that.
And your justice system. Yeah, and your justice system.
We look at it and we just think this doesn't look right. It can't last. That's how we feel about it.
No, that's not a question, but a statement, and I'm glad you made the statement because I don't take umbrage with that statement at all. I mean, I don't disbelieve what you're saying. It's almost impossible to believe that you can make a leopard change its spots, right? Yeah. So that's why I say it's Zimbabwe for South Africa. It's still going to be a decline unless some miracle happens here, and maybe prayer helps with miracles, but I mean, it's as you say, it's tough to get people who are accustomed to our turn to eat to behave themselves, and that's what the ANC. Look, the ANC. We were talking earlier, and the ANC. They have failed on every level and willfully failed. They had every opportunity, 62% of the vote. They could have governed legitimately. And I remember in the beginning, I think I mentioned this one of my talks here before, I said in the beginning, the level of corruption was almost comical, farcical in how inept they were at stealing. But sadly, they've become very good at stealing. No, but think back to Tony Yangani. He went to jail over getting a discount on a car loan for, I forget the amount, but was it 5,000 Rand or something like that? It was ridiculously low. I mean, that's in it. He's a member of parliament and that's what he does for corruption. Look, if you're going to get me to compromise my morals and my character, we're talking 40 million, before you even get my attention. Seriously. I mean, that's ridiculous. But now they're talking 40 million and 40 billion, and a trillion Rand. It's insane. It's funny because there are people that actually believe Ramaphosa. And I'm like, what planet are you on? Are you on planet Reebok? I mean, seriously, this is insane. You remember those ads, don't you? Those ad breaks. No, but I mean, look, this guy was part and parcel of Zuma's government as a deputy president. He was on the board of, was it Implats or whatever, when the Maracana situation happened. Frankly, that's a whole other story. And but anyway, but the miners, anyway. But I mean, he was part of the state capture era. But then this fake Ramaphosa that the media pimped and pushed in 2017, 2018, when he came in office after the conference, and he won over NDZ, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, by 35 votes, by the way. Not much. I mean, I guess he paid just enough money to people to get them to vote for him in that conference. Anyway, and I think that's probably what happened here too. If you saw the national executive meeting of the ANC, there's some serious division there in this whole concept, even aligning with the DA. And I suspect that Cyril Ramaphosa is probably several million Rand poorer this week because he must have convinced people to agree to that based on. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. But no, I got you. It's hard to believe that a leopard will change its spots. But what are you going to do? What do we do? Yes, sir.
So, Principal, what if the ANC then aligned with the EFF? Well, then that's just Tuesday for us.
Just Tuesday. I thought it was Thursday, but okay, Tuesday. It's early in the week.
Maybe difference to us whatsoever because they're scamming on Stevie.
Yep.
So I don't think I think the DS made a mistake.
Okay.
You can see the hands here didn't go up. This is a reflection of maybe the Western Cape. I don't think many people are very happy that the DS got into this alliance, and it's going to work against them in the next election. I don't know where people are going to turn to, but if an alternative comes or support of more smaller parties will probably happen, but I don't think people are that. I know what I was happy about it.
Well, you're not on camera, and I won't tell people where your hands came from, but if I could informally ask, how many people voted DA in this election? Unless okay, just two? Okay. How many people voted ACDP? One? Freedom Front Plus? Okay, that's more, but your party got pummeled, unfortunately. It did. I mean, we'll talk about that. Look, I know Dr. Pernavod very well. I've interviewed him many times, had lunch with him. Wonderful human being in my view, but it didn't go well for the Freedom Front Plus for a number of reasons. All right, so Action-SA. Nobody.
We didn't vote also.
Who didn't vote? Yeah, okay. Nobody's going to raise their hand. Okay. Actually, a couple people are honest. A few people who didn't vote. Thank you for that. And I suspect that people may not have voted because you've just given up or you don't trust the system or look what you got stuck with. And that's your prerogative. I mean, not voting is a way of voting. I don't encourage it, but it is a way of voting. So, yeah. I don't know what to say. I mean, honestly. Yes, sir.
So, I work in the service industry, so I meet all walks of life.
Sure.
I speak to people, I listen to the heart of the people of the Western Cape in my areas where I work, and like I said, across the board. And the heart of the people are the same. We share the same concerns, we share the same ones. We want an opportunity to have a job. We want to have an opportunity to make life better for ourselves and our children. And not be robbed doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, we want the lights.
Safe in your home and hearth.
We want the lights to stay on, and we don't want people breaking into our houses and our cars. That's basically maybe in the States as well what the general people want.
Sure.
And what we've seen is, in a small way, the DA coming with glimmers of hope through the years that they have been in control of the Western Cape and improving things that the people are shouting for. And I've seen that, and other people agree with me that other provinces believe that the DA have made the difference. But it's the people that have told the DA what they must do to make the difference. So in many instances, I mean, like the Northern Lagoon, that was so full of E-coli. I met people who went and they went out of their pockets, built labs in their houses and tested the water every day and kept gunning them until they started to do something about it. So it's the people that brought the difference, and then the DA coming in and taking credit for that.
Sure.
So the problem that we have in this country is twofold. We have people believing the lies that the ANC have been feeding them for decades, thinking that there's this big monster that they can't do anything because this monster's going to eat you. People actually believe it. They don't realize that they have the power, that they can come together and be the difference that they want. The other problem is that we don't have people that are educated and insightful enough, sadly for many different reasons, and some reasons we won't even understand, that can raise up and be leaders in their communities and take control and bring the differences around. So that's the problems that we're sitting with. And a question at the end of all of that is, do you have advice on how awareness can be created to address those issues, to bring about the differences that are there?
That's a great statement and a fair question. And I would, before I answer the question, let me just say that one of the challenges you have about people who would rise up and be leaders in communities is gangsterism that's going on in this country. A lot of people who would potentially be leaders are being taken out because they're a threat to criminal gangs or to mafias in the construction industry or in the taxi industry. I mean, in broad daylight, AK-47s assassinating taxi bosses in Nelson Mandela Bay. It's insane. Endangering the public, just spraying. So that's one reason why you have a hard time getting people to rise up. So the question, if I recall correctly, was, do I have any advice on how we change that? Is that really the gist of the question?
Yeah, also creating the awareness.
The awareness, okay, yeah. That's probably the biggest challenge, okay. And so Cyril Ramaphosa is very fond of making statements that are ludicrous, you know. For instance, vaccine apartheid, you know, blaming the West because South Africa didn't have vaccines. Well, you've got a domestic pharmaceutical industry. Aspen Pharmacare is one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Why didn't they develop vaccines? Why didn't they participate with Moderna or Pfizer or AstraZeneca or Abbott developing? Look, I'm not saying you should get the jab. I'm just saying, why didn't they do that? So he runs around because they make the decision to take the easy path and join the COVAX scheme that the UN came up with.
You were right the first time.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, waiting for the response. Anyway, so they join that, doing nothing, and you have a domestic pharmaceutical industry, and then we have African intellectuals running around telling lies. They're experimenting on black Africans. Folks, 90% of the people who got the jab during the testing period were Brits and Americans who were white. There were no black Africans being tested on this stuff because nobody in Africa was doing it. It's total nonsense. Now, malaria vaccine is a different story, but we're not talking about that. Anyway, so he loves to say nonsensical things, and he does this all the time. But one of the statements that Cyril Ramaphosa loves to say is, Bantu education was worse than no education at all. And I agree 100%. ANC Bantu education is worse than no education at all. 30%, 30%, 30%, and 40% your first language? How do you tell someone they're a high school graduate when they get 40% proficiency in the language that it's a mother tongue? That's insanity. It's intentional. It's done to dumb down the electorate, to dumb society so that you can lead people like sheep. Governments, including my own, don't really want critically thinking citizens who can question things, not be critical. I mean, we can all call people names and be angry. That's being critical. But critical thinkers, it's intentional. So it's incumbent on people who want to engage to be the ones to take the place of that, to go out and talk to people. When I started broadcasting on YouTube a few years ago, 4 years ago now, wow, time flies. We weren't having fun, but time does fly. So 4 years ago, I had a lot of extremely to the right South Africans glom over and come to my channel. And that's fine. I don't mind people coming over as long as they're respectful. You know, on the left, if they want to have a cogent conversation, they're welcome as well. But anyway, a lot of them came over and they were talking about, I said, you need to get out in the communities if you're political parties. But in this case, we're talking about civil actors, not, okay? People like you. You're not a political guy. You're in your community. You're concerned. You want something to change. You want people to be aware. So you're going to go out and do it yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to form Wyatt-SA or, you know, whatever, the Daily Reader, whatever, some group. You can do it on your own in your community and help people. In Chatsworth, in Durban, Karo Charo, if you know who that is an Indian comedian, and he's from there. And Karo Charo, I went there in 2022. He took me around Chatsworth, and we went to all these places. Black South Africans, Indian South Africans. It's a majority Indian place where you disused banana plantation or something like that, where they dumped all these Indians in the Group Areas Act. Anyway, so all these poor people know him, and they have tremendous respect for him because Karo Charo puts his money where his mouth is. And he ran as an independent candidate in this race. He got 12,000 votes. He did better than I did in my election by a wide margin. But he was competing nationally, 63 million people, well, 16 million people. But anyway, so Caro Charo, when we walked into a neighborhood, no pavement, just dirt, no electricity, no running water, he walks in there and these people come out and greet him. Not because he's a conquering hero, not because he's a politician, but because he cares and goes in the community and he talks to these people and he informs them and tells them what's really happening. And so they're informed. When I started telling people to do, before I knew who Caro Charo was, before I started telling people to do that, people are like, oh, you don't understand, Chris. I can't go there. I'm white. I can't go to Kailicha. I can't go to Mitchell's Plains. Yeah, well, there's black and colored people who live there who have the same values that you do. Find a way to meet these people. And if they're in that community, then let them be the voice to go in that community and talk. And that's how it has to start, one person after another. And I know that sounds like a very simple answer, but there's truth in that. There really is. It's hard, but look, what's the alternative? Worse, right? It just gets worse. So, I mean, my advice is that if you're concerned and you have the ability to influence people in a community, then do it. Tell them what's really going on. For instance, it drives me nuts. The opposition in this country, all of them, and there's a few parties I actually like, and I respect leaders of many of the parties, but all of them are useless. They're feckless. How is it the ANC gets away with telling people that the DA will take away your SASA grants? They don't come from the ANC. They come from you, the taxpayer. You're the ones paying for that. And everybody in Parliament voted for that crap. I don't like handouts. I mean, you teach a man to fish, anyway. So that's why I call it crap. Anyway, I appreciate the need for it anyway, but no one's taking away SASA grants. If you look at the manifestos, and I hate that word, it's communist, manifesto. It sounds like Karl Marx. Anyway, but every party has a manifesto, and every single party wants to give more money to the poor. The DA wants to increase it. Look at their manifesto. Everybody, almost except the ACDP and the Freedom Front Plus, I don't think they want to increase it. I'm trying to remember, but they all. The IFP wants to increase, the ANC wants to increase it. So what's the difference? So why aren't people telling people? It's because they support as well. But why are people in the community going, hey, why are you voting for the ANC? Well, because of this. So let me give you an anecdotal story of why things are the way they are. And this is frustrating. But this will pass too. And the generation is coming, it's going to pass. So I went to Reeflay. There's a lot of Reeflays in South Africa. But I went to Reeflay, which is below Zeerust in Northwest Province. And I used to live in Botswana, so I have affinity for that part of South Africa and the Tswana-speaking people because, hey, came Botswana. Anyway, but so there's a small party up there called the Forum for Democrats who were cheated out of a seat in the municipal elections by the IEC. We'll attribute it to a mistake, but Zeerust refused to remove the EFF council that was erroneously put in that seat. There was a court case. Eventually, they got in the seat. So the party really likes me because I made people aware of that and got them support so they could actually get their seat that they were entitled to, that they earned in the election. So I went up there in August last year, my last trip here, and they took me out to Reeflay. It's about 30 kilometers south of Zeerust. You go out on a horribly potholed road. You're going to blow tires if you go fast. So you got to go about 60 most of the way. You can't drive fast. You get down there about 25 kilometers, 27 kilometers. You turn off onto a dirt road. Now, there's a small community down there in Reeflay that formed in the 1980s when a slate mine was there. The slate mine was put in place, and it was all mined out within a few years. But these people were allowed to live there by the landowner. He let them live there because they were the workers and their families close by. And that way he could rely on them being there for work. And then he still owns the land, but he's offered to sell it to Zeerust multiple times and at a very reasonable price. But the ANC doesn't want to buy it. So there's no electricity. There's no piped water. There's no sewage. The road isn't paved with coal tar. There's no medical facilities. There's nothing there. So my Tswana is pretty rusty. So I had somebody be my interpreter. And so we sat down and we talked to a go-go. And she was willing to go on camera, so we interviewed her. And you can find her on my channel if you look it up. And I interviewed her and I said, can I ask you a question? She said, yes. After we talked for a little bit, she told me how long she'd been there and what it was like being there. She's one of the first residents there. And I said, ma'am, do you vote? And she said, yes, I do. It's my responsibility. I said, well, thank you very much. I feel the same way. I voted in every election since I became eligible to vote in 1983. It's a while ago. Anyway, I voted in every single election because I think it's important. That's my choice. And I thanked her for voting. And I said, can I ask you another question? She said, sure. And I said, whom do you vote for? And this was her response. I vote for the ANC. And so I said, why? Because I'm supposed to. The ANC has successfully hoodwinked people into believing that they brought liberation to this country. They did not. They're but one of many parties that brought the end of apartheid. But the real reason apartheid ended was demographics and the collapse of the Soviet Union. The government, which was a security state under the National Party at that stage in your history, could no longer justify to the population, the white population, that this was a system that was going to be sustainable. And so they had a referendum underdeclared. 62% of white voters decided to change the system. And that's the main reason why it ended, because it collapsed the Soviet Union. There are other reasons, but the ANC did not liberate this country. That's poppycock. But they have hoodwinked through the international media, who all fell for it, and through domestic captured media here, that they are the ones that ended apartheid. They played a role, but they didn't end it. And so people believe that they owe them something because they ended apartheid. You need to change that narrative. You need to tell them that's not true. And oh, by the way, most people in South Africa today that are alive were born after apartheid was over. So you've only ever had the ANC ruling at national level. So that might be a good thing here too, why they're forced into coalition, because people see that it's not just the ANC that can rule the country. I know you're a skeptic, and I agree with you. South Africa has lost 300,000 industrial jobs. You had industry here. Love them or hate them, the National Party was very successful at substitution. Sasol, taking the Ribbentrop-Fischer process and taking coal and converting it to liquids. The only country in the world that did it since the Nazis did it in the Second World War, and did it very successfully. It created not just a place to make diesel and petrol and paraffin through Sasol, but a chemicals giant that was very successful. You had a defense industry that made its own products. The Rooivalk, one of the most advanced helicopters on the planet at the time, was developed, and many other things beyond that. The Buffaloes and the Caspers and the Rooikats, all those things were pretty advanced. In fact, we relied on them after losing so many soldiers because we had idiots running our defense industry who didn't make buying protected vehicles. And so we turned to South Africa's technology. So you had a government that was able to keep an industrial base and was able to do substitution. And you've shed 300,000 jobs. And what's happened? Well, Chinese corporations have been given exclusive economic zones on South African soil, employing only Chinese nationals, and they're paying no taxes and producing things here. The government here, you have one option if you want to go back to where you're producing everything on your own. And South Africa can do that in many cases. If you go back 25 years ago, I may be wrong with figures, but it's close. I get these backwards sometimes. I think it was 90% of the clothing sold in South Africa was produced in South Africa 25 years ago. It might not be the exact figure. And 70% of the shoes produced or sold here were produced here. Now it's like 10 or 15% of the shoes produced here and like 25% of the clothing. Now, some of that,
Not bad, globally.
it's not good. You lost 300,000 textile industry jobs. Lesotho lost 200,000. That was devastating to their economy, but that was tied to the multi-fiber agreement, which is an artificial thing that was created by the World Trade Organization. So you can come up with protectionism, but then you pay a cost for that. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying, but I don't believe in protectionism. But the challenge, of course, is that someone else can always do it cheaper, more efficiently in many industries. And as a consequence, unless you have protectionism, which I'm not arguing you should have it, that comes into your economy. And it'll drive high-cost producers out, and it'll drive things out of business. So one reason why South Africa is not producing a lot of gold is, I mean, look, it can be produced. And now people are trying to get more of it out because look at the price of gold. So it becomes more profitable. But when gold goes below $1,000 an ounce, then it's not as profitable, and it's so deep it costs a lot of money. So it's a very complicated situation when you talk about, and there's no one answer to it. And when if you want to be self-sufficient as an economy, it's difficult to do that. It's not impossible, but it's difficult, and there are costs that come along with it. But I would argue that the reason why you've shed so many jobs and the reason why things are so bad in this country economically is because of foolish macroeconomic decisions by the government in charge, which has undermined your economy. I mean, for instance, when the government illegitimately shut down your economy and locked people up for, walking on a sidewalk during lockdown, they came up with the Tourism Relief Fund, which, by the way, was a joke. I mean, the amount of money you could get from was like 10,000 Rand. It was something ridiculously low. It was almost no money. And the only people who benefit from that are people that ran, combis as a taxi service because, that amount of money. It's not going to save a hotel if you get that Tourism Relief Fund. But the thing was racist. You had to be a black South African in order to get it. And the North Gauteng High Court actually upheld that and said that's legitimate. And then it was appealed to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And of course, they overturned it. But what happened? The money that was set aside was all gone. So, I mean, these are stupid own goals that the government has done. And some of it's intentional and some of it's just wrong-headed. I mean, BEE is an absolute disaster. Who suffers the most because of BEE? White South Africans? No. Black South Africans. Because business doesn't invest I know so many business owners in South Africa who intentionally keep their payroll below 50 people so they don't fall prey to the BE. And so a company with a brilliant idea and a brilliant service really can't grow and hire more people because then they have to give their equity to somebody else based on racism. It's stupid. These are own goals, and there's so many more. So if people don't vote, if they don't engage in a community and tell people, hey, look, the ANC's lying to you or the DA's lying to you, they're not really approving things here. Look at this. It's you and the community. So don't vote for them. Vote for the ACDP or vote for the XYZ or whatever. If people don't, then it just continues. It's continued for 30 years and it's got progressively worse. Look, I'm not criticizing anybody here, and I hope nobody infers that. And I'm not saying people aren't being pragmatic. I'm just saying that the solution that they've come up with for the moment is the most pragmatic decision that was possible under the circumstances you find yourself in. We see how much the ANC is willing to concede or not concede determines the success or failure of what's going to happen. Regardless, the chances aren't great that it's going to be a success. And here's the bottom line, and I'll give it a percentage, okay? Right now, 25% best case success. That's what I say. Depending on what ministries the ANC is willing to back away from and hand over to the DA and maybe to the IFP, that number could go up. But a lot, so I think that's a fair statement. I think that's fair. And so we should all be skeptics, okay? We should all be skeptics. So I think that's kind of where it's at right now. But once again, I timed my trip so that I would be here for the election and long enough for the inauguration, the swearing in, and then the announcement of the cabinet. I want to be in South Africa when that happens so that I can talk to South Africans and get their views on the street, whether it's in Belleville or it's in Khayelitsha. By the way, on election day, I don't know if I told you this once here last time, but I went to 12 polling stations on election day. Somerset West, so I went to a variety of polling stations. I didn't just go where white folks hang out or just black folks or colored folks. I went all over. Somerset West, 5 in Khayelitsha, Munenberg, Rondebosch. You can see very different communities here, right? Sea Point, Woodbridge Primary. Sorry? No, I didn't go there. Oh, I did go to Table. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's right. Table. Sorry. Yeah, Woodbridge Primary, Parklands, and Tableview is my last stop. So very different variety of communities here. And so I did talk to a lot of South Africans, white, black, and colored, and got their thoughts that day. Some were optimistic, some were pessimistic. Many of them were frustrated that they were standing in line. Fair enough. So I timed it, and hopefully we get an announcement of the cabinet. I'm leaving to go home on Tuesday. So I'm in my last week, which is kind of sad. I really enjoyed being here, but not wealthy, so it costs money. But anyway, so I'll be here till Tuesday, and hopefully we'll have the cabinet announcement before then. And now that the Bulls have gone and messed my travel plans up, but in a good way. I mean, look, that's not bad, right? Look, okay, I'm a Stormers fan, but you got to root for the Bulls this weekend, right? Anyway, so that kind of breaks up my time in Western Cape. I thought I was going to catch my breath after tonight. I talk to you all, take a break, go look at the Penguins. Who doesn't love the Penguins unless you live next to them? They're nasty. Anyway, but if you live next to them, you don't like the Penguins. But go see the Penguins, hang out, have a couple beers at the Kopstadt Brauhaus, take an Uber back so I don't get drunk and have an accident. I was going to relax, but now I'm going to be running back and forth, and I've got appointments. So even Monday, I'm still meeting with people. And so anyway, but so 25% right now. You're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
And you've been very patient. Thank you, sir. I don't think you'll get anyone that'll disagree with you that the world has abandoned God by and large, and that there's a moral decay on this planet. I certainly won't disagree with you. You and I had a long conversation before about this very topic, did we not? And I was actually given I won't go into the story, but I was given a very high compliment by a friend of mine who's a Muslim. You and I talked about this, about morality. And yeah, it's missing. And if people aren't moral, how do you expect them? I mean, you have to have a guidepost, right? You have to have standards that you adhere to. And let's face it, throughout the history of our species, or of humanity, faith has been the one thing in community after community that's typically put a guide marker out there of how you're supposed to behave, what you're supposed to do, and who you're supposed to respect. And that's missing in society. I mean, we talked about this. So a lot of people talk about, fatherless children in South Africa, and the percentage being somewhere around 60% or something like that. I don't know what the actual figure is because there's lots of quotes, but it's not good. But that's nothing compared to America. And we're a country with faith is still very important. Over 75% of Americans are practicing their faith, and most of them are Christian. Some are Muslim and some are Jews, about 9 million Jews. But over 70% of Americans attend religious services regularly and consider themselves to be people of faith, despite what the media will tell you. We're not an atheist nation. We're not. That's a lie. That's crap. When I went to Europe for the first time in 1984 as a young, I keep giving away my age. When I went there in 1984, I should stop doing that. As a young soldier, I was like, oh, Europe, I'm so excited to be here. And all these cathedrals and churches and basilicas, it's so amazing. And I would go there, and if I went on Sunday, there were like 3 ladies in their 70s. Because Europeans are people that don't have faith by and large. There are people of faith. There are Christians, Muslims, Jews, but mostly Christians and Jews, mostly Christians. But most Europeans, they're just secular. They've abandoned faith a long time ago. But back to the point I was trying to get there, I'm having a senior moment here, but we were talking about the morality of things. In America, 78% of black children, whether they're born by 2 black parents or mixed race, 70% are illegitimate. 60 years ago, less than 10% of black children are illegitimate. But I'm not picking black folks. 45% of Hispanic children are illegitimate. I'm not picking on Hispanics. 25% of white children are illegitimate in America. 25%. So I'm not going to stop there. Asians, as we talked about 3 or 4 decades ago, the percentage of Asian children born in America was 1 or 2% max. And that's because most Asians, by and large, numerically in America, were the descendants or immigrants of Koreans, Japanese, or people from mainland China. Communities that are traditionally very conservative and do not tolerate out of wedlock, births and things like that, so that they shun that. So that was 1 or 2%. Today, because of the vast immigration of people from Pacific Islands, and I'm not making moral judgment, but you're welcome to, the vast immigration numbers from Samoa and places in the Pacific Islands, we have seen the number of illegitimate Asian children rise to 9%. If the best in your society is that 1 out of 10 children in one ethnic group are illegitimate, there's something wrong with your society. And it goes back to what you just said about faith and about God. Just a second, sir. Again, we were chatting before, and I said, I find it so disheartening. Life is such a precious gift. 2 people get together through the grace of God, and an egg is fertilized, and a human being begins the life. A woman, okay, a woman carries that child for 9 months normally. We're all born pretty much the same way, unless somebody has a cesarean section, but we're all born the same way. We're going to leave this planet. I've not seen anybody that's lived since time immemorial. Unfortunately, I'll leave at some point. Someone raises that child, teaches that child, inculcates that child, hopefully introduces them to a faith, so they have belief in a higher power, teaches them right from wrong, disciplines them, feeds them, nurtures them, raises them to adulthood, only for some scumbag to walk into a tuck shop in Pretoria, put a gun to a man's head, and execute him for 200 Rand that's in the till. We have lost God. We have lost humanity. This is unacceptable. And we have to fix that. Not just in South Africa, as you said, all over the world. It's everywhere. It's unbelievable.
Heartbreaking how little
regard
and how little value people have over another human life.
Yes, sir. 100%. That is what makes me the most heart sore. Look, I was in the military. I served multiple combat tours, but I joined the military not to go to war and kill people, but to serve as a deterrent, to be a force that was professional so that people would not misbehave. And by and large, many miscreants did misbehave because we had a deterrent force. Unfortunately, there were conflicts and had to go to that. But my job as an intelligence professional was to make sure that our commanders were as informed as best as possible to reduce the impact on civilians, on the enemy, so that fewer people are killed. And I believe that I did my best to make that happen. And anyway, but the so little regard for human life is shocking. And you know what? It never seems to change. The history of the 20th century is one of terrible bloodshed and total disregard for human beings. I mean, the Armenians being slaughtered, people forget about that, the genocide there. People forgot about the Turks being slaughtered in what used to be part of the Ottoman Empire, in Romania, in Bulgaria, and also in Greece. The people forget, much more recent things, Rwanda with 850,000 people hacked to death. Who has that kind of lack of humanity? Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. These ghouls are chopping up black Africans, chopping up other black Africans who are their neighbors and dumping them in wheelie bins and laughing about it. It's sickening. How do we get to this point? Is Satan responsible for this? Is it total abandonment of God? I don't know. I'm not preaching. I'm just asking a question. It's sad. It's really sad. And that's not really what the theme of this conversation was, but But it breaks my heart. It really does. I don't get it. Life is so precious, and so many people have so little regard for it. And you talked, was it you earlier, I think, said Cape Town is the most dangerous city in the world. Yeah, it was you. And if you go out here to Mitchell's Plains, you go out here to Kailicha, you'll find that out. It's true. If you go to Sandown or you go, to Sea Point, less likely that's going to happen, but not impossible. It happens there as well. And it's just sad to me how cheap life is, and the total disregard, not just for life, but for the dignity of another human being. The ANC loves to talk about gender-based violence every time they get in trouble. Every time they're in trouble, they get caught with their fingers in the cookie jar, or they fail. Gender-based violence, we've done this. You've done nothing. The disregard and disrespect for women and girls is epic in this country. And I will criticize South Africa for that. We have rape, we have gender abuse in America, but we can't even hold a candle to the abuse that women suffer in this country. Unbelievable. And the default position of many of these people who abuse women is to murder them after the fact, after they've abused them. Unbelievable. It's shocking, the disregard. How can anybody do to another human being? I don't get it. And it happens it's happening right now. Some woman is being abused right now. Some woman is being murdered right now. Some woman is being raped. And the authorities talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, in a perfect world, in this imperfect world we have, in a perfect solution to that, the DA gets the finance ministry. They make Halabisa the deputy president. That's not going to happen. Paul Mashatile, the corruption accused will be the probably. But Halabisa becomes the deputy president. The DA gets finance, public enterprises, justice, police, and education. That's a perfect solution for the circumstances, but that's not going to happen.
Rail?
Transnet, that's a public enterprise, so that would fall under like Pravin Gordon portfolio. That would fall under whoever gets that. So same with Eskom, same with Airports Company South Africa. All that stuff would fall under that. So the reason why that matters so much is the finances are a disaster. This country is in junk bond status. You can't borrow money at a reasonable rate because the government can't be trusted to pay it back because they steal it. So you need to fix finance for that reason. Taxation, nobody wants to hear this, but tax collection is poorly run. SARS used to do a much better job. I don't like taxes, but I'm just saying they're doing a poor job. So that needs to be fixed. Education needs to be fixed to get rid of BELA, the Basic Education Law Amendment Act. That's a disaster. That is, of all the things, that and expropriation without compensation, if they become the law of land and the government starts enacting on those, is the most likely thing to lead to conflict in this country, in my view. You have at least one group in this country that will not bow to losing their culture. They picked up stakes by and large and left here and moved east, came in conflict with the Xhosa, fought 7 wars, picked up stakes, went into the Orange Free State, the Transvaal, down in Natal. They moved afield to Namibia, to Angola, to be away from that, to protect their culture. And that's Afrikaans-speaking people will not tolerate that. And that will lead to conflict if they are no longer allowed to have their own language schools. And that's going to be a major source. So that I think that's going to die. I hope it's going to die. But if it doesn't, that's going to lead to conflict in this country. And the other, look at 1976 and 85. Students rioted and demonstrated, although there was other stuff going on, but because of the Afrikaans medium. And that caused problems in this country. And the same thing will happen, except not by kids, but by adults who won't tolerate this. There's other cultural groups that feel the same way, but that group of people, and some of you are in that group of people, if not all of you, won't tolerate that by and large. And it's not going to, there's no way that Afrikaners can give up their language. The ones that are going to give up their language and culture have left for New Zealand or Canada. People are staying here. What's that? Or Australia. Yeah. So, I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry. Okay. All right. Sometimes I get a little astray, so I get excited about this stuff. Anybody else with a question? I don't think that's a priority for them. The DA happily says they support LGBTQ plus element of, sorry, I don't mean to be insulting, but I can't keep up with the letters. I mean, I grew up, you were gay or you were a lesbian, so now it's so confusing, or bisexual, that's what people were. But they happily endorse that. The ANC, it's in the Constitution. Neither one of those parties is going to tackle that and address it. Bestiality is not a topic that I hear very much about anywhere. It exists, but I haven't heard much about it. So I don't think that's going to come up at all. I hope that's not a major problem for South Africans. I mean, look, I'm not going to say that because I'll get in trouble. Not with you guys, but with Kiwis and Welshmen. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want the Welshmen to be mad at me. Sorry. What's that?
I know what the joke is.
Yeah, I know you know where I'm going with that. So, did you have a question, sir? Okay, yeah, we were going to talk about that. So, can we transition to that? I can come back and answer questions about South Africa. Again, from my perspective, I'm an outsider. I'm a ferner, as we say in America. I'm a ferner. People go to any length whatsoever to keep Donald Trump from becoming president, won't they? He's just been convicted of 34 counts of a non-existent crime.
Sure.
Yeah, and on July 11th, will be sentenced for that. And I'm predicting that the judge will sentence him to 3 years incarceration, suspended, and get him with a massive fine. If they actually try to, sorry?
Reliable to be president?
Yes. Unlike South Africa, our constitution doesn't bar people who are convicted criminals or who are former criminals from serving in the government. I give you the example of Marion Barry, who was the mayor of Washington, D.C., and was buying cocaine from the FBI in a sting operation back in the 1980s. And then he served his jail time as a felon, came back and ran for the city council, and was back on the council until he died. So we don't have that. And the reason we don't have that in our rule, let me explain why. Because some people say, how can you be a convicted felon and serve? In his case, he shouldn't have been back in government. But the founders of our country realized that governments get out of control. And sometimes people who are innocent are unfairly prosecuted and convicted of crimes. And so therefore, they did not put a provision in to prevent people from serving, because a government could become abusive and try to prevent someone from becoming an elected official by fraudulently charging them with crimes and convicting them. And as a safety measure, they left that in there. So you can serve as a convicted criminal in America in office. It's possible. Now, that may sound counterintuitive or unfair, but I think it was a wise decision. And this is the perfect example of it. Donald Trump has been convicted of a crime that does not exist. And let me explain that very quickly before we move on from this. Donald Trump is accused of accounting fraud. He's the head of a corporation, so he's liable for it, but he didn't commit the fraud. He didn't sign the documents if there is fraud. In New York, which is where he was tried, that crime has a statute of limitations of 3 years. So after 3 years, if you haven't charged someone with that crime, you can't charge them. It's no longer, it's dead. It's not a crime anymore. The government doesn't get to come at you 70 years after you commit a crime and go, oh, you stole money in 1926. Now we're going to convict you. No, 3 years. They didn't prosecute him. He was president from 2017 to 2021. And this obviously happened before that. So that's a long time ago. So they took an expired statute. They took a federal crime related to elections, which they have no authority over. A state court, which is like a province, has no authority to prosecute federal crimes. Only the Department of Justice can do that, federal courts. So that's bad enough. They put the two together and claimed that in conjunction, it presented a conspiracy. Aha, a new crime. Now we can prosecute. No, you can't, because you have no authority with this, and that's expired. But then on top of that, this is why the case in a free and fair system, which I'm not convinced we have in America now, that breaks my heart to say that, but in a free and fair system, this case will be thrown out and the judgment overturned because the following reason. The prosecution did not tell the jury what the crime was until after the trial. Explain. So you have closing arguments. So you have the prosecution. This man committed the crime. Here's the witness to tell us. What did he do? Here's the physical evidence. All right, the defense comes, no, this guy's lying, man. We don't know who that guy is, and this evidence is tainted. All right, so you get to defend yourself. Well, they didn't tell the jury that it's a conspiracy based on an expired statute and a federal crime we have no authority over until closing arguments. The case is over. Then the prosecutor says, in summation, ladies and gentlemen, this dirtbag Donald Trump did the following. He took this accounting thing and the federal law. And so now the Trump team has no opportunity to defend him. They can't present evidence to refute it. They can't bring witnesses to refute it. So they have no defense against a crime that they weren't charged with. This is a kangaroo Soviet trial. Donald Trump is guilty of nothing in this case. Nothing. And he's got 34. So now they can tell the world he's a convicted felon. It's not a convicted felon. He didn't do anything wrong. Nothing wrong. And I'm on record saying that. You got it. Okay. And this is ridiculous. This is beyond conception here. So, all right. Did I answer the question? Who's your question? No, it's still here.
I'm a Donald Trump.
Okay, you're a Donald Trump fan. Okay. All right. Well, I vote for him. I don't like him, but I vote for him. I don't like him, but he's effective in my view. And so I voted for him twice. I'll vote for him one more time. And he's convicted of 37 more crimes. And, I'll still vote for him because at this point, it's pretty obvious what's going on. Yes, sir.
why stick with Biden, even if you're the Democratic Party? I mean, what is their infatuation with Biden, especially with the deterioration? I mean, you've got a lot of Democrats now that are even turning against Biden because he's getting so bad now with the way he's freezing on stage, he can't answer questions. What is it about him? Is it because he's a puppet? Because a lot of us are looking at this and going, you know what, even if I was a Democrat now, it's gotten so far out of hand with keeping Biden in power. Surely they would want someone else, even if there's going to be an election. Why still have him as your number one candidate? It doesn't make any logical sense.
Because Biden's not running the country. As you said, he's a puppet. That's my view. That's been my view all along. He's a useful idiot. Yeah.
His fault, but you're right.
No, I mean, seriously. Look, I mean, the guy has accomplished nothing in 50 plus years in federal government. Anybody, you're not American, so it's not fair to ask this question, but you might know. Can somebody point to one piece of legislation or one thing he's done to improve a person's life in the last 50 years? Before he became president, let's go with that. The only piece of legislation he ever sponsored in the Senate, where he spent 36 years or something like that, was the 1990s crime bill, which came up with the 3 strikes and you're out, which led to many black men going to prison for a mandatory minimum sentence because they had 3 felony convictions. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right. I'm just saying that's what he accomplished. Yet he's loved. Well, he isn't anymore, but he was loved by a lot of black Americans. Not anymore, though. Black men have abandoned Joe Biden in record numbers, and they're voting for Trump overwhelmingly. But they're not alone. Hispanics are voting overwhelmingly for Trump. Asian Americans are voting for Trump. White folks are voting for Trump. Everybody's voting for Trump. Now, we'll see what the numbers are in the end. But yeah, why is Joe Biden there? Because it's a corrupt system. Look, I mean, I just ran for office, and without regaling you with some of the things that happened, I discovered even at the state level just the dirty games that people go to win office. So I've got an advertisement. It's actually on my phone. If you're curious and like to see it, I mean, I don't know if we can project it, but I'll show you my advertisement that ran on election day that was put together for my campaign. And you'll hear me narrate, and I'll say something along the lines that a politician should not be in office or running for office for craven political power, self-aggrandizement, or self-enrichment. But most politicians, that's why they're there, for those 3 reasons. Political parties exist for craven political power. The ANC and the DA exist so they can be in power, not to represent you. People in political office should be a servant leader. And this comes back to faith, too, if you look at it that way. People who serve you. These people work for you. And my politicians are supposed to work for me. The system is so out of whack that they have blue light escorts, they have exorbitant salaries, and they lord over you and me. They think they're more important than we are. And that's nonsense, and that's the gentleman stepped out. But that's where communities have to turn the tide. They work for you. They respond to you. Don't be hoodwinked by the media. Don't be hoodwinked by distractions about this person's a racist or this guy did this many years ago. You judge people for what you see them doing and not doing and who you believe in the character of their soul. And I think that's what matters. And that's a phrase I'm going to use till my dying days. And I'm sure someone said it before, but I never heard it. And I coined that phrase during my campaign. You know, you should be a servant leader. You don't serve in office. You don't run for office for craven political power, self-aggrandizement, and self-enrichment. But that is, and I tell people this all the time. I said in America, I said, and I'm very harsh about this, probably why the Republican Party doesn't like me, even though I ran as a Republican, that in our government at the national level, we have 100 senators and 435 representatives in the country. And I say that amongst the 100 senators, in my view, 25 of them are patriots who care about faith, family, and flag and serving the people. And that's what they try to do. Not restrict your liberty by coming up with more laws, but serve you in the best fashion they can to meet your needs. In the House of Representatives, out of 435, I think we have maybe 75 patriots. Most in one party, a few in the other party. And that's sad. The people go in office for guaranteed incomes. You know, and I used to tell people, I said, the problem with Congress is it's full of, ambulance chasing shyster lawyers and failed used car salesmen. There's a lot of truth to that, because you get elected and many times because you're more attractive or you have more savvy, or, people find you more interesting. Well, that's not why you should vote for someone. You should vote for someone because they believe in your case, in God and what's right and just and divine. I believe that's a fair statement. You would agree with that. They should be the people you vote for because you believe in them morally. They're going to do the right thing. People let us down. We're humans. That's why Christ died for our sins, right? I mean, we commit sins, we make mistakes, but many politicians, this is just about them. And so I understand your frustration. I share it. I'm heartbroken at just the dirty things that happened in my political campaign. I mean, it's not a big deal. I'm not losing sleep, trust me. And I told her, I said, during the camp, I think I told you, but I told someone else today, during the campaign, I refused contributions. There were 5 candidates running, and I said, don't give me your money. I'll take the risk. I'll use my savings, and I did. I'll use my savings to finance my campaign. All I ask is you vote for me. Listen to my argument, and hopefully you believe who I am and trust that I'm going to do the right thing. Vote for me. That's all I ask. If I win the primary, because our system, you have to win your party's primary, and that was in April, and then in general, in the election in November, you run. I said, if we win, then if you want to donate, I'll be the candidate. Let's do that. And I didn't win, and that's life. And there's some very dirty stuff that happened, but I didn't commit any dirty tactics. And I left that race, as I said, with my character, my dignity, my integrity intact, and my dignity. And that's the best you can hope for, I think. Did you have another question, sir? I think it's a fair question. So a lot of people are still grousing about the 2020 election. I think they have fair basis to do that. This is one reason why I'm not streaming tonight, because YouTube would remove my channel if I told the truth. so I can't do that on YouTube because they censor things. There's always election fraud in every election. There's probably some election fraud here in South Africa. The question is it significant enough to overturn the results? Arguably, many people would say that 2020 it was, particularly in Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. Without those states, Joe Biden loses the election. So Georgia, the margin was 12,000 votes. And there's some very serious questions about the integrity of that election that have yet to be addressed, despite what the media will tell you, despite what politicians will tell you. There will be fraud. There always is fraud. And it will be committed by Democrats and Republicans. With the scrutiny on the election and people know and ready, I'm not convinced it'll be significant enough to change the outcome. That's my view at a national level. Maybe local election, because we also have senators and congressmen running and local officials. There may be other races like that where something is affected. But I think at the national level for president, I think there's enough scrutiny that it's not going to happen that will change the outcome. I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. Well, it comes back to what the gentleman over here, I think, was talking about, informing people about what's going on. So let me give a couple anecdotal stories in my race to talk about that. So first off, you're right. A lot of South Africans, and this came from mostly white South Africans a couple years ago, like, well, black South Africans will never change. They'll always vote for the ANC. And I pointed out to them in 2019 in Gauteng that 18% of the black voters in Gauteng voted for the DA in 2019. Now, maybe because of Musi Maimane, maybe because of the policies, I don't know. But so clearly that's not a legitimate argument that black folks will always vote for the ANC. This election proves that's not true either. They won't always vote for the ANC. So people, black and white, though, do tend to vote out of loyalty, misplaced loyalty. A lot of people who vote for the DA vote for them because that's who they vote for. I've talked to DA voters and they can't tell me what their manifesto is. They don't even know that they want to increase the basic income. They would like to have a basic income grant. They don't even know that. They don't know their positions, but they vote DA. Same with the ANC. Same with the ACDP. It's most people don't vote from an informed position. That's just the reality. So you have a good point there. Now, let me tell you a couple anecdotal stories about voters, okay? We talked about this, I think, didn't we? All right, so first off, I'm on record as not a fan of abortion. I think it's murder of a child, okay? That's not a faith-based position. That's a science-based position. The left always likes to call us science deniers on the right. Not a science denier. Life begins at conception. That's life. You don't like that, then you don't like science. So there is a faith-based component to my abhorrence to abortion, but that's not the main argument. It's a science. So at one of the polling stations, Warrington Township, which is where our ski resort is at. We actually have a ski resort right nearby me. It's about 10 kilometers away. And it's not bad. Anyway, the ski resort, that's where people went to vote. And my volunteer is an older gentleman who really liked my campaign. And he talked, there's a lot of older voters come there, because it's mostly older people that vote. Younger people just don't vote. So a couple of the older ladies, 3 of them during the course of the day, and there was probably a lot more, came through and he talked to them, gave them my old palm card, which has my name and my positions and my candidacy. And you're allowed to do that, campaign outside with a certain distance from the polling station. He did that. And then they went in and a couple of them like, oh, I know the colonel, very impressive, great accomplishments. They go inside, they come out, and 3 women at least during the day came back and talked to him and said, well, I didn't vote for the colonel. Why didn't you vote for the colonel? Well, because he supports abortion. Where did that come from? I've never, ever said I'm in favor of abortion. I've said that there are circumstances that we can discuss if the mother's life is in jeopardy. We could talk about that. I'm not a fan of it, but we can talk about that. Or incest or rape, we can discuss that. But I never said I favor abortion. In fact, I find it abhorrent. Yet people were telling voters that I support abortion. So they voted for the candidate they believe was the Christian. Now, this one's really going to make you scratch your head. So one of my young volunteers at one of the smaller polling stations had an older lady come up to him, and he handed her the palm card. She said, oh, the colonel, yeah, I think I'm going to vote for him. He's very impressive. He's got a lot of accomplishments. She went in to vote. She came back out a little bit later, and she walked over to him. He said, well, did you vote for the colonel? No. The colonel was in the army when Obama was president. True, by the way. And also for George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton and Trump. And anyway, so the colonel was in the army when Obama was president, and Obama was importing Muslims to America. So I voted for the Christian. What? So I lost her vote because President Obama was importing Muslims. First off, he was importing Muslims. I'm not a supporter of Obama. And oh, by the way, your bigotry aside against Muslims, it's. So look, that's not a very well-informed electorate. And this is one reason why you see that I'm not crying or upset that I didn't get elected to office. If people are that uninformed that they're going to make a decision whether to vote for me or not based on that, then I can't change that. And it goes back to your point, what's the point of voting? Well, listen, I'm convinced voting can change things. It's difficult in South Africa, and that's why I said start at the municipal level. People didn't listen. I can't influence the whole country. Not everybody watches my content. But let's hope that this inconvenient coalition bears fruit. Maybe prayer will help us. Yes, sir.
Stick your neck out.
Haven't I already done that?
Not yet. Who's going to win the American election?
Donald Trump. It's going to be an electoral landslide.
Why do you say that? Just go into a little bit more.
Sure. Jacob Zuma is fond of playing the victim, right? Jacob Zuma, oh no, they're prostitutes. I didn't commit any crimes. What did I do? They're out to get me. And look, he gets 15% of the vote, 14.5% of the vote in the country. They've turned Donald Trump into a victim. They have made Donald Trump a victim. Let me just run through how. Okay, first off, New York passes a law which says that anyone who felt they were sexually harassed or sexually assaulted at any time in history can file, even if the statute of limitations is expired, against someone. So New York legislature passed that. They did use it to prosecute people. How many people in New York State do you think were prosecuted under this legislation? Take a guess. New York's a state of, 16 million people, 20 million people. How many of New Yorkers were prosecuted under that law? 1. Donald John Trump. The statute was in effect for 12 months. Isn't that funny? You can no longer do that now. You can't sue someone. Talk about garbage. So he was not convicted because it's a civil lawsuit. There's no conviction. There's no criminal penalty here. You can only be fined or, that sort of thing, or apologize. He was found liable for sexually harassing a woman 25 years prior. The woman did not claim that he raped her, did not claim that she was assaulted, never went to the police, never told any of her friends. He doesn't know who she is by his own comment. Didn't ever heard of her before. A civil court in New York of his peers found him liable for $10 million for that. A 70-plus-year-old woman said she can no longer get work, which is a lie. She got fired by Vogue magazine because she was useless, and then she claimed Donald Trump was the reason she got fired. So that was the first thing. That's nonsense. And then because he talked about it after the case, the judge came back and slapped him with another $50 million or $60 million fine on top of it. So she gets $75 million because she falsely claimed or she waited after there's no crime here. So that's the first one. Then this classified documents thing. That's a much more complicated one. It'll take me a while to explain it, so I'll try to do it very quickly. Joe Biden, as a senator, stole classified information. I know for a fact my co-host was in the White House communications team as a non-commissioned as a non-commissioned officer, and was part of the Biden detail when he was vice president. He would go home to Delaware on the Acela train, that's our passenger train from DC, every weekend. He would sit on the train, on a public train, and open up his satchel. and pull out top secret, sensitive compartment information and classified documents. You cannot leave a secure facility with those documents. That's a federal felony conviction. That's what Hillary Clinton did. He did it every weekend. His military team would come over and say, sir, you can't have that here. We're not in a secure facility. You have to put that back. Oh no, it's okay. These are my people on the train. He doesn't even know who these people are. They don't have clearances. He did that over and over again. So Joe Biden is discovered, inconveniently for Joe Biden and for the Democrats, with classified documents sitting in a box next to his Corvette at his home in Delaware in a Biden think tank. I mean, how ironic is that? Biden's think tank. In a think tank in Washington, D.C., what the public can walk into and Chinese agents are known to have frequented, classified information, not even secured, just sitting on a shelf for years, for 9 years. Where are the charges against Joe Biden? Where is the trial against Joe Biden for criminal theft of classified information? He had no authority to take that information. Donald Trump, on the other hand, was president. And I'll tell you what probably happened. This is my analysis of what happened. The Trump administration was shocked, couldn't believe they lost the election. I couldn't believe they lost the election. So they tried everything they could legally to try to stop it, short of an insurrection, which they didn't commit, by the way. They tried everything to stop it. And here it comes to the, Biden's going to be inaugurated on the 21st. So it's the weekend before. Oh man, crap. We got to leave on Monday. Hey, look, box up all the stuff here in the office, take it out of the file cabinets, box it up, put it on Air Force One, send it to Mar-a-Lago, and put it in the closet. And that's probably what happened. And classified documents got put in there, a few classified documents. But we now know that the FBI, which lied to us publicly, also committed fraud. They went, when they raided Mar-a-Lago, they put documents all over the floor, and they took classified cover sheets and put them on documents that weren't even classified to give the impression that Donald Trump had thousands of classified documents, which wasn't the case. This is an abuse of power that's unbelievable. So they made him a victim because people aren't stupid. They've seen that. They see they're out to get Trump and they're making up crimes. Look, Trump has classified information. Should he have had it? No. If it's just secret information, he's allowed to retain it because he was the president, provided it's stored properly. Well, storage properly means it's behind two systems of lock, usually in a safe, and then the door's locked outside. When the National Archives came down there 3 times to Mar-a-Lago to collect these documents, the first time they met with Trump and his lawyers, he said, these are my lawyers, they'll answer any questions you got, let me know if you need to talk to me. They went and looked at documents, they said, these aren't secured properly, secret documents, you need to put another lock here. They put a padlock on it, gave him the key, said, that's how you store it, it's okay. They left, it came back the second time, they came back a third time. Then suddenly the Department of Justice decides to do a raid. They sent 40 FBI agents wearing body armor at dawn with CNN and the media there. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has FBI agents who go up to his house. Can we look in your garage? Can we see what you got here? No body armor, no armed weapons, no SWAT teams. People see what's going on. They're not stupid. The demented lunatics who will vote for Joe Biden and who insist on destroying our country aren't going to change. And that's 25 to 30% of the population that votes. So that's cooked in. That's not going to change. But the rest of the population sees what's going on here. And it just goes on and on from there. None of this is legitimate. It's all Soviet-esque. And it's shameful. I have no confidence whatsoever that if I was charged with a crime in America, I'd get a fair trial now because I'm a conservative. I mean, we saw this. So in the 1990s, the federal government passed a law, which I think is unconstitutional in my view, that makes a felony conviction if you impede an abortion. Okay? Murdering a child results in a felony conviction if you impede that. So they want to make an example of this woman who is an anti-abortion activist sitting on a sidewalk outside a clinic, a public sidewalk. She was arrested for impeding. Normally that's a fine. She has just been sentenced to 5 years of her life as a convicted felon in a federal penitentiary. She just went to jail. Meanwhile, a gentleman whose son was assaulted by one of these pro-abortion lunatics outside an abortion clinic. He beat his son. He intervened to push the guy away. Didn't assault him. Protect his 12-year-old son who was with him. The FBI shows up on a Sunday, the day of worship for Christians, with dozens of agents with body armor and weapons in front of his family of 12 children, to arrest him in front of his neighbors, to shame him, and puts him in jail with no bail, leaves him there for several days until he gets bail. The gentleman who committed the assault is allowed to voluntarily surrender himself and never gets convicted of a crime. This is no system of justice. This is not the country I spent 36 years of my life supporting a constitution which recognizes no color, no gender, no faith. Christian, Muslim, Jew, white, brown, black, male, female. We're Americans. American is not an ethnicity, it's an ideal. And it's falling apart because of these leftist lunatics. And it's our fault for not standing up. But I will tell you that the tide has turned. And it started in Virginia a couple of years ago. And I'll tell you exactly why, and then we'll probably have to wrap up because people are getting tired, it's getting late. So, in Virginia a few years ago, Terry McAuliffe, a slimy Democrat who had been the governor for, she had to take a break, was running for governor again. I think he'd been senator maybe for Virginia for a while. And Virginia, for a century, was a reliably conservative state. However, DC, where all the power rests, like a third world country, people needed homes, they wanted bigger property, so they start moving into Virginia across the river. And you get hundreds of thousands of these people, tend to be politically leftist and bureaucrats, and that changed the dynamics of Virginia because the population base became concentrated there instead of throughout the rural areas. And Virginia went from being a reliably conservative to a middle of the road, sometimes left, sometimes right. Well, McAuliffe ran against Glenn Youngkin, who's the current governor of Virginia. A high school girl was raped in a bathroom in a public school by a transgender male. The person believes they're female. Allowed to use the female bathroom, raped this girl in the bathroom during school. The principal and the school board covered up the rape. The girl, of course, was traumatized, didn't tell her parents about the rape. Eventually, the father found out about it. He went to the school board meeting, obviously angry that this school had covered up that his daughter had been raped. And now her innocence and her life is altered forever. And they covered it up for political convenience because they want to push their trans agenda. So he went to the school board meeting and he asked a question. I saw the video of it, was recorded, it was shared online and in the news. And they were disrespectful and rude to them. So he tried to talk and they talked over him. Then they accused him of being disruptive and had sheriff's deputies escort him out of the room. When people saw this, suddenly things began to change in America. In Virginia, Glenn Youngkin is the first Republican governor, and I'm not saying he's a great governor, bad governor, the first Republican governor in the history of the state of Virginia, which goes back to the 18th century, to win every single county. Every single county went Republican, including the leftist counties around DC and the DC Beltway in Virginia. Never happened before. That started to change things. Where I live at, local high school, people want to introduce the Satanist Club a few months back. School board meeting. Woo! You should have seen how many people showed up at that school board meeting. Not on our watch. Parents got involved. Suddenly they cared about what's happening at their school, how their children are being taught, inculcated, and the garbage happening there. Now, I went to a school board meeting recently, I have no kids in the school, in which there was discussion of use of transgenders in the bathroom. And there's a couple students who consider themselves transgender in that school. And you should have seen how many people showed up at this. People got engaged. As parents, as a society, we've sat back for far too long and let other people raise our children and let other people make decisions for us in politics and in government. People have to get involved. They have to stop this. We are the majority. Rational, conservative, clear-minded people who believe in faith, family, and flag. Almost everywhere in the world, we're the majority. Not a plurality, a majority. The wackadoodles are minority, but the wackadoodles are running the zoo. And you've got to step up. That's why voting matters. I know you're discouraged, you don't believe it. That's why voting matters. You must have community involvement. And that has turned the tide in America against this woke garbage. It's not over. Oh, they're fighting, they're fighting back. But now people aren't sleepwalking through life. They're not fat, dumb, and happy because they got their iPhone and their pad and they're soccer moms and they go here and they go there and ride around in their nice cars and, and they can go out and have dinner all the time because they got a comfortable life. Well, all of that is less important now because my daughter was assaulted. My son lost out this. My daughter lost the track race because a boy is running against her. People are angry and getting engaged in America. And people need to be angry, not violently, but angry and engaged in South Africa. And that's the only way we turn the tide. It's not easy. It's a war that we have to fight forever. Reagan said that liberty is always one generation from disappearing. We have to fight for freedom every generation. And we've lost that as a developed Western world. And South Africa, I know people call it third world, this and that, but you're also a developed country as well. And we have lost sight of that, whether it's the loss of God, or it's the loss of faith, or it's a loss of morality. We have lost that as a society, and Western civilization is on knife's edge. So we must stand up and defend it each and every day. And I just ask people to do that. So hopefully we can do that. All right, we'll wrap up there. Thank you so much, folks.
Thank you.